Welcome back to Your Anxiety Toolkit. My name is Kimberly Quinlan. I'm a marriage and family therapist. I am so happy to have you here with me today. Today, we speak with Ethan Smith, who is an international OCD advocate. He is an amazing advocate for OCD, talking so real and so vulnerably about his whole recovery. And we've had him on the show multiple times, and he's here to give, I would say, an update on his walk of recovery, of the practice of compassion, of applying his tools throughout new life and exciting changes for him. If you're looking for something that's a little uplifting, that's real and honest and validating, this is going to be the episode for you. And I'm so grateful for Ethan for trusting me again with his story, coming to tell us here with you his experience of the ups and the downs of recovery. Welcome back, Ethan Smith. I love you. Tell me how you are. First, tell me who you are, because for those who haven't heard of your brilliance, tell us who you are.
Oh, you stop. I love you. No, my name is Ethan Smith, and I'm a national advocate for the International OCD Foundation and just an all-around warrior for OCD and letting people know that there's help and there's hope. And that's what I've dedicated my life to doing.
Yes.
So,
and you have done a very good job. I'm very, very impressed.
I appreciate that. It's a work in progress.
Well, that's kind of the whole point of today, right? It is a work in progress. For those of you who don't know, we have several episodes with Ethan on. This is a sort of a part 2, almost part 3 episode, just catching up on where you're at. So the last time we spoke, you were sharing about sort of the journey of self-compassion that you're on, and recovery in many areas. Do you want to sort of briefly catch us up on where you're at and what it's been like since we met last?
Yeah, for sure. We'll do like a quick recap, like the first 3 minutes of a TV show where they're like, "So you're here, and what happened before?"
Previously on.
Yeah, previously on Real Ethans of Coweta County, which sounds super country and rural. So no, last time we spoke, I was actually really vulnerable, and I don't mean that as a touting myself, but I said for the first time publicly about a diagnosis of bipolar, and at that time when we spoke, I had really hit a low, a new low that was came from a very hypomanic episode, and it was not related to OCD. And I found myself, in a really icky spot. And part of the reason for coming or reaching that bottom was when I got better from OCD, and into recovery and maintenance, navigating life for the first time as an adult man in Los Angeles, which isn't an easy city, navigating the industry, which isn't the nicest place, and having been born with OCD and really that comprising the majority of my life. The next 10 years was really about me growing and learning how to live. But I don't know that I knew that at the time. I really thought it was about, okay, now we're going to succeed and I'm going to make money and live out my dreams and meet my partner and stuff's going to happen because OCD is not in the way. And that isn't to say that can't happen. Wasn't necessarily, and I had some amazing life experiences. It wasn't like I had a horrible 9 years. There were some wonderful things, but one of the things that I learned coming to this diagnosis and this conclusion was how hard I was being on myself by not, quote unquote, achieving all the goals and the dreams that I set out to do for myself. And it was the first time in a long time, really in my entire life, where I saw myself as a failure and that I didn't have a mental illness to blame for that failure. So I looked at the past 9 years and I went, okay, I worked so hard to get here and I didn't do it. And I worked so hard to get here in a personal relationship and I didn't get there. And I worked so hard to get here financially and I didn't even come close. And in the past, I could always say, oh, OCD anxiety. I couldn't do it. I couldn't finish it. I dropped out. That was always in the way. And it was the first time I went, oh, wow. Okay, this is on Ethan. This is on me. I must not be creative enough, smart enough, good enough, strong enough, brave enough. And that line of thinking really set me down a really dark rabbit hole, um, and into a really tough state of depression and hypomania and just engaging in unhealthy activities and things like that until I just came, crashing down. When we connected, I think I had just moved from Los Angeles to Atlanta, and sort of was resetting in a way. Um, Taking a step at that time, it very much felt like I was taking a step back. I had left Los Angeles. Um, it was just wasn't a healthy place for me at that time, and my living situation was difficult because of my upstairs neighbor, and it was just very complicated. And so I ended up moving back to Georgia for work, and I ended up moving back in with my parents. I don't remember if we talked about that or not, um, but it was a good opportunity to reset. At that time, it very much looked like and felt like I was going backwards. I just lived for 10 years on my own in Los Angeles, pursuing my dreams and goals where I was living at home when I was sick. Well, what does this mean? I'm not ready to move. I'm not ready to leave. I haven't given up on my dream. What am I doing? I think if we skip the next 3 years from 2019 on, in retrospect, wasn't taking a step back. It was taking a step forward. It was just choosing a different path that I didn't realize because that decision led to some of the healthiest, most profound experiences in my life that I'm currently living. Um, and so I can look back and at that moment see like, oh, I failed. I've given up. This is backwards. And in reality, it was such a beautiful stepping stone and being willing to step back to move forward, to remove myself from a situation and then reinsert myself in something. So, where I am now is I'm engaged to be married. I guess that's what engaged means. I guess I'm not engaged with a lawyer, so I'm engaged.
Your
And
phone
that's
isn't
really
engaged.
exciting. Yeah, for sure. To an amazing human being. And I have a thriving business and I'm legitimately doing so many things that I never thought I would do in life ever. Whether it had to do with bipolar or, more prominently in my life, OCD, where I spent, from age 20 to 31 kind of accepting that I was homish bound and that was going to be my life forever and that I'm quote unquote disabled or handicapped and that's just my normal and we're going to have to I had that conversation with my parents. That was just something that I was going to have to live with and accept. So doing lots of things that I never expected to do. But what I've noticed as with OCD, um, as the stakes seem raised because you're engaging yourself in so many things that are value driven and that you care about, the stakes seem higher. You have more to lose. When you're at the bottom, it's like, okay, so what? I'm already like all these things. And so, but like, I, you know, nothing can go wrong now because I'm about to get married to my soulmate and my business is doing really well and I have amazing friends and I love my OCD community. And, and so like, the thoughts and the feelings are much more intense again because I feel like I have a lot more to lose. And so, whereas I was dismissing thoughts before, now they carry a little bit more weight and importance to me,
Hmm.
because I'm afraid of losing the things that I care about more. There's other people in my life. It's not just about me. And with that mindset came a not a disregard, but an almost forgetting how to be self compassionate with myself. Self. Um, one of the things that came out of that bipolar diagnosis and my moving forward was the implementation of active work around self-compassion. I
Mm.
did workbooks. I worked very closely with my therapist, and we proactively did tons and tons of work in self-compassion. And I realized that you can interrupt me at any time because I'll keep babbling. So please feel free to interrupt. Um, I realized that I was not practicing self compassion in my life at all. I don't know that I ever had. Learning self compassion was like learning Japanese backwards. It was the most confusing thing in the world. The analogy that I always said, my therapist, who I've been with for 13 years, she would say to me, you just need to, accept where you are, embrace where you are right now. It's okay to be there. Give yourself grace. And she would say all these things. And I always subscribed to the, like, you have to work harder. You can't lift yourself off the hook. Drive, 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 drive. And that was what I knew. And I tried to fight her on her logic. And I said, well, if there's a basketball team and they're in the finals and it's the halftime and they're down by 10, does the coach go to the basketball team, hey guys, let's just appreciate where we are right now. Let's just be in this moment, recognize that we're down by 10 and be okay with that. It's like, no, of course not. He doesn't go in there and says that. He goes, you better get it together and all this stuff. And I remember my therapist goes, yeah, but they're getting out of bed. I'm like, oh, okay. That's the difference. They're actually like living their life. I'm like completely paralyzed because I'm just beating myself down. But what I've learned um, in the last 3 or 4 years is that self compassion is a continuous work in progress for me and has to be like a conscious, um, intentional practice. I found myself in the last year really not giving myself a lot of self compassion. Um, and there's a myriad of reasons why, but I really wanted to come on and talk about it with you and kind of just share, some of my own experiences and pitfalls and things that I've been dealing with. I will say, like, the last 2 years have probably been the hardest couple of years and the most beautiful simultaneously, but hard in terms of OCD and thoughts and triggers and anxiety and just my overall baseline comfort level being raised because, again, there's so many beautiful things happening. And so that terrifies me. I mean, we know OCD triggered by good stress or bad stress, so this is definitely one of those circumstances where the stakes seem higher, they seem raised. And so I need more certainty. I need it.
Mm.
Like, I have to have more certainty. I don't really, I'm okay with uncertainty, but part of that component is the amount of self-compassion that I give myself, and I haven't been the best at it the last couple of years,
Mm.
and especially in the last 6 months, I haven't been so good.
I think this is very validating for people, myself included, in that when you are functioning, it it doesn't seem like it's needed. Like, but but when we're not functioning, it also doesn't feel like it's needed, right? So I want to catch myself on that. What what are some roadblocks that you faced in the implementation of this sort of journey of self-compassion or the practice of self-compassion? Like, what gets in the way for you?
Yeah, I will give you a specific example. So as part of my 2-year journey, in the last year and a half, I started working with a nutritionist. I mean, and physical health has become more important to me. It may not look like that, getting there, work in progress, but the reality of it is, and this is just true, I'm marrying a woman who's 12 years younger than me. I want to be a dad. I can't wait to have children. And the reality of my life, which I'm very accepting of my current reality, which was something I wasn't. And we were probably talking about that before, which was like, I wanted to be younger. I hated that everything was happening now. I wasn't embracing where I was and who I was in that reality. I'm very at peace with where I am. But the reality of my reality is that I will be an older father. And so a value driven thing for me to do is get healthier physically because I want to be able to run around and play catch in 10 years with my kiddo at 55 or 60 and be able to be, in their lives as long as I possibly can be. So I started working with a nutritionist. And for me, weight has always been an issue. Always. It has been a lifelong struggle for me. I've always yo-yoed. It's always been about emotional eating. It's always been a coping mechanism for me. And I started working with a nutritionist, and she's become a really good friend and influence in my life, an accountability partner. And I'm not on a diet, lifestyle change. There's no foods off the table, and I track and I journal. But in doing this, I told her from the beginning, the first 3 months, I will be the best client you've ever had. Because that's what I do. I start perfectly. Then something happens and I get derailed. And I was like, my goal is to come back on when I get derailed. That is like the goal for me. And that's exactly what happened. I was the star student for 3 months. I didn't miss a beat. I lost 15 pounds. The goal wasn't weight loss, mind you. It was just eating healthier, making more intentional choices. And then I had some OCD pipe up. My emotions were dysregulated, and I really struggled with the nutrition piece. And I did get back on track. Over the last year, I gained about 7 pounds doing this nutrition. And over the last 6 months, I was so angry at myself for looking at my year journey. And this is just an example of multiple things with self-compassion, but this is the most concrete and tangible I can think of at the moment. But looking at my year and looking at it with that black and white OCD brain and saying, I failed. I'm a piece of crap. I haven't, I'm not where I want to be. In my journey, I've had all of the support I could possibly have. I have all the impetus, oh, I want to be thinner for my wedding. I want to look my best at my wedding. Like, what is wrong with me?
Mm.
How did I, in these vulnerably emotional states or these moments of struggle, why did I give in? And in the last couple of months, I would not get, I literally refused to give myself any compassion and any grace around food and screw ups and mess ups and any of that. I refused. My partner, Katie, would tell me, Ethan, you have to love. I'm like, no, I do not deserve it. I'm squandering this opportunity. And I just wholeheartedly refuse to give myself compassion. Um, and because it's always been an issue, like, what's it going to take? Well, compassion can't be the answer. I need tough love of myself, right? And I think I did this in a lot of areas of my life, because for me, I don't know, there's a stigma around self compassion. Sometimes, even though I understand what it is on paper, and I've read your workbook, and I've studied a lot of Kristen Neff, who's an amazing self compassion expert. And so, on paper, I can know what it is, which is like simply embracing where you are in the moment without judgment and still wanting better for yourself and giving yourself that grace and compassion, regardless of where it is. And I felt like I couldn't do that anymore because I wasn't supposed to. Like, I wasn't allowed. I suddenly reframed self compassion as a weakness, and as an excuse rather than, and it was very much how I thought about it before I even learned anything about self compassion. And I found myself, um, yeah, just not a very loving person myself. My internal self talk was really horrible. I mean, and probably the worst. I mean, if somebody was talking to me like this, you always try to make it external and be like, oh, if somebody talked to you like this, would they be your friend? Would you listen to them? And I was calling myself names. I gave myself no room. And it was almost in every facet of my life. And it was really, really eating at me. Um,
Mm.
so yeah, it took a significant, yeah, go ahead.
I always, when I'm with clients and we're talking about behaviors, we always talk about that the complex outcomes of them, right? Like the consequences that you were being hard on yourself, that it still wasn't working and so forth. But then we always usually spend some time like looking at, let's say somebody is drinking excessively or doing any behavior that's not helpful to them. We also look at like why it was helping them, because we don't do things unless we think they're helping, right? What was the reason you engaged in the criticism piece? How did that serve you in those moments?
I mean, it didn't in retrospect. In
Yeah.
the moment, I think behaving in that way feels much like grabbing a spear and putting on armor.
Mm.
I don't know if it's stigma or male stigma. I mean, I've always had no problem being sensitive and being open to sensitivity and who I am as an individual. But with all of this good in my life, my emotions are more intense, my thoughts are more intense, my OCD is more intense. And and I felt like I need to put on I basically defaulted to my original state of thinking before I even learned about self compassion, which is head down,
Yeah.
bull horns out, and I'm just going to charge through all of this
Yeah.
because it's the only way, right? And it's just like losing insight when you're struggling with OCD. It's like you lose insight, you lose objectivity. And it's like there's only one way through this, and I'm gonna. And I think it's important just to note, in addition to the self compassion piece, like this year especially, there's been some physical things, some somatic symptoms that I've gotten really stuck on. Um, I'm really grateful that, and I love to talk about it with advocacy. It's like, advocates, all of us, doesn't just because we're speaking doesn't mean that we have like an OCD free life, right? Or a struggle free life. That's just not it. I always live by the mantra, more good days than bad. That is my jam.
Yeah.
And, I'm pleased to report that in the last 13 years, I've still had more good days than bad, but it doesn't mean that I don't have a tough month. Um, I think that in the last uh, couple of years, I've definitely been challenged in a new way because there's been some things that have come up that are valid. They're actually, I have a lot of health anxiety, and they've been actual physical things that have manifested that are legitimate things. And of course, my catastrophic brain grabs onto them. And you Google once, and it's over. I have 3.5 minutes to live for a brown toenail,
You died
and
already.
I'm already dead. And so I think it all comes back around to this idea of self stigma, that even if all this stuff, like I'm not allowed to struggle. I'm not allowed to suffer. I have to be a rock. I have to be all things to all people. Um, it's all these very black and white rules that are impossible as a human being to live by
Mm,
because that's just not reality.
mm,
Um, and so, I mean, I think that's why the tough exterior came back, because it was like, all right, life is more challenging. And the beautiful thing about recovery is, for the most part, it didn't affect my functioning, which was amazing. I could still look at every day and go, I was 70% present, or I was 60% present and
mm,
40% kind of in my head, but still being mindful and still doing work and still showing up and still traveling. And from somebody that was completely not just shuts down, different people respond different ways to OCD. From somebody that came from like completely shutting down and being bedridden, like this was a huge win. But for me, like I couldn't just, it wasn't a huge win in my head.
yeah.
It was a massive failing on my part. What
Yeah.
was I doing wrong? How was it, and just as much as I would talk, and every week on my live streams, and I talk about, not, it's a disease, it's not a decision, it's a disorder. It's like, I can say that all day long, but there are times when it tricks me, and I stigmatize myself around it.
Right.
And so it's been very much that in the last year, for sure, and it's been extremely challenging. And in facing this sort of new baseline for myself, because let's face it, I'm engaging in things that I've never experienced before. I've never been in a 3-year relationship with a woman. I've never been engaged. I've never bought a house. I've never owned, outside of acting, I've never owned a business or been a business person. I mean, these are all really big commitments in life, and I'm doing them for the first time. And if I have insight now, and it's like I can have this conversation and say, yeah, I have every reason to be self compassionate with myself. These are all brand new things with no instruction manual. But it's very easy to lose sight of that insight and
Yeah.
objectivity, and to sit there and say, we do a lot of comparing. So it's very easy to go, well, these are normal human
Yeah.
things. Everybody gets married. Everybody works. This should be easy. And you talk about like never compare struggles ever. Like,
Right.
if somebody walks to the mailbox and you can't, that does, never compare struggles. But that's me going, well, this is normal life stuff. It's hard. Well, what's wrong with me?
Right. I think for me, when I'm thinking about when you're talking, I go in and out of beating myself up for my parenting, right? Because gosh darn it, I can't seem to perfect this parenting gig. Like I just can't, like I can figure it out. And what's so interesting is when I start beating myself up, and if I catch myself, I often will ask myself, if what would I have to feel if I had to accept that I'm not great at this? Like I actually sort of suck at this. And it's usually that I don't want to feel that. I will beat myself up to avoid having to feel the feelings that I'm not doing it right. And that has been like a gateway for me, like a little way to access the self-compassion piece. It's usually because I don't want to feel something, right? And that for me has been really helpful. And I think that when you're talking about what this perceived failure, right? Because that's what it is. It's a perceived failure. Like, you know, we're all a failure compared to the person who's a little bit like further ahead than us. What feelings do you have to like? What is it that you don't want to feel?
It's a tough question. I think, you've caught me speechless, which is rare for me. I'm glad you're doing video because otherwise this would be a very boring section of the podcast. Um, I don't like feeling. For me, the failing piece isn't as much of an issue. It was before. I don't feel like I've failed. In fact, I feel like I'm living more
Yeah,
into where I'm supposed to be and my values. I think for me, the discomfort falls around um, being vulnerable and
yeah,
not in control. I
yeah,
think those are two areas that I really struggle with. I think opening. I always say sometimes I feel like I'm naked in a sandstorm.
yeah,
That's like how I feel, right? That's the last thing you want to be is naked. Well, you don't want to be in a sandstorm, not naked, but naked in a sandstorm. I just feel you imagine you don't want to see me naked at all. That's the bottom line. No nudity from Ethan. But regardless, you're probably alone in the sandstorm. But you feel the stinging and all of that. And no, I'm just saying that's what I picture it
yeah.
feels like.
It's
And
an ouch. That
and
feels
and
like an
that's
ouch.
it feels like a big ouch. And I think that vulnerability for me is scary. I'm not good at showing vulnerability, meaning I have no problem within our community. I'll talk about it all day long. I'll
Mm.
talk about what happened yesterday or the day before. I'll be vulnerable. But like to people who don't know me, I struggle with it.
Yeah, me too.
Or to yeah, we all have our public face. But vulnerability scares me in terms of being a human being, being fallible, um, not being able to live up to expectation. What if I have to say I can't today, or I'm just not there right now,
Mm.
um, and not having control of things that scare me. Um, those feelings, I think, have really thrown me a bit more than usual.
Yeah,
Again, and I keep saying this because things feel more at stake, and they're not, but I feel like I have so much more to live for.
yeah,
And that's not saying that I didn't feel like I didn't have a reason to live before. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm simply saying like everything, like dreams come true. And how lucky am I? Um, but when dreams come true with OCD, you know, it latches onto the things we care about most and then says that's going to be taken away from
mm.
you. And here are all the things you have to do to protect that thing. And I think it'd been a long time since I'd really faced that. And so, yeah, I think to answer your question in short, I think for me, vulnerability and uncertainty around what I can't
Mm.
control, impacting the things that I care about most,
Yeah.
um, are scary, are
I
scary.
resonate so much with what you're saying. I always explain to my eating disorder clients, you when you have an eating disorder and you hit your goal weight, you would think we would celebrate and be like, okay, I hit it, I'm good now. But now there's the anxiety that you're going to go backwards, right? And so even though you've hit this ridiculous goal, this unhealthy goal, the anxiety is as high as it ever was because the fear of losing what you've got is terrifying. So I think that's so true for so many people. Um, and I do agree with you. I think that we do engage in a lot of self criticism because it feels safer than the vulnerability or the loss of control or whatever that we have to feel. What has been helpful for you in moving back towards compassion? I know you said it's like an up and a down journey, and we're all figuring this out as we go. What's been helpful for you?
A couple things. I think it's worth talking, or at least bringing up this idea of core fear, um, because, and I've done some recent core fear work, just trying to determine at the root of everything, what is my core fear, because and for me, it comes down to suffering. I'm afraid of suffering. I'm not afraid of dying. I'm afraid of suffering. And I'm afraid of my entire life having to be focused on health and disease. And because that's what living with OCD when I was really sick was about. It was always like, that's all I focused on. And so I'm so terrified of my life suddenly being refocused on that. And even if I did come down with something awful, it doesn't mean that my life has to solely focus on that thing, right? But in my mind, my core fear is, what if I have to move away from these values that I'm looking at right now and face something different? That scares the crap out of me. So the first thing around that core fear is, the willingness to let that be there and give myself compassion and grace. And what does that look like? Which is a lot of things. It's, this fear, this kind of new fear and anxiety hasn't stopped me from moving forward in any way, but it sure has made it a little bit more uncomfortable and taken a little bit of the joy out of it. And that's where I felt like I need to put on like a second warrior helmet and fight, instead of not resisting and opening myself up and being willing to be naked in a sandstorm. One of the things that I've learned most about, and it's as a business owner yourself, and if you're a workaholic, um, setting boundaries and self-care is really hard. And I didn't really connect until this year the correlation between self-care and self-compassion. So if I don't have self-compassion, I won't allow myself to give myself self-care.
Yeah.
I won't do it, because I don't deserve it. And there's a very big difference between time off, not working, sleeping, but then actually taking care of yourself. Like, it's three different things. There's working, there's not working, and then there's self-care. And it's like, and I didn't know that either, right? It was like, well, I didn't work tonight. Well, that's not necessarily self-care. You just weren't on a meeting or
Yeah.
you weren't working on something, right? It's like self-care is proactive.
Yeah.
It's purposeful, it's intentional. And giving myself permission to say no to things, even at the risk of my own reputation, because I feel like saying no is a big bad word, because that shows that I can't handle everything at once, Kim. I can't do it all. And that is a no-no for me. Like, no. Everybody needs to believe that you can do everything everywhere all at once. Which was a movie. So, that's the biggest piece of it. So, recently I was able to employ some self-care where it was needed, at the risk of the optic seeming like I felt like, here I am, world, I'm weak and I can't handle it anymore. That's what I feel like is on the other end. That's what I'm saying. Like, so I was sick, and I had been traveling every week since the end of March. every week. And I don't sleep very well. I just don't. And so when I'm going from bed to bed, I really don't sleep well. And I had gone on, I had been in like 7 or 8 cities in 7 or 8 weeks. And I was headed, I had been home for 24 hours and this is only 3 weeks ago. And I was about to head out on my last trip. And the meeting that I was going for, the primary reason, got canceled, not by me. And I was still going to meet with people that I love and enjoy. And I woke up the day before I was traveling and I was sick. And I was like, oh man, do I still go? Like the big reason was off the table, but there were still many important reasons to go. But I was exhausted. I was tired. I was sick. My body was saying enough. And I had enough insight to say, I'm not avoiding. This isn't anxiety. This is like straight up. And when I texted the team, this is around work and things that I value, and I was like, I'm not coming. I said, I'm not coming. They responded, we totally understand. Take care of yourself. And what I read was, you weak ass bastard. You should suck it up and come here because that's what I would have done. And why are you being so lame and lazy? Like, that is and this is just an instance of generally what I feel if I can't live up to an expectation.
Yeah.
I always put these non-human pressures on myself. But making this choice within 2 days, like I was able to reset intentional. This doesn't mean I'm going to go to bed and avoid life. I rested for a day because I needed the sleep to get better. But the next few days were filled with value driven decisions and choices and walks and exercising and getting back on nutrition and drinking lots of water and spending quality time with people that I care about, and my body and brain just saying, like, you need a moment.
Yeah.
And within a couple days, everything changed. My OCD quickly dropped back down to baseline. My anxiety quickly dropped back down. I had insight and objectivity. When I went back to work later that week, I worked from home, like I was way more effective and efficient. But I wouldn't have been able to do that. It was very, very hard to give myself self-compassion around making that simple decision that everybody was okay with.
I always say my favorite saying is, I'm sorry, but I'm at capacity right now. And
I like
that
that.
has changed my life because it's the truth. It's not even a lie. Like I'm constantly at capacity and I find that people do really get it. But for me to say that once upon a time, I feel this when I was sick, the same thing. Like they're going to think I'm a total nutcase if I keep saying no to these people. But it was like, that is my go-to sentence. I'm at capacity right now. And it's been so helpful.
Yeah,
And
max
I think
bandwidth.
yes. And what I think is interesting too is I think for those who have been through recovery and have learnt not to do avoidant behaviors and have learnt not to do compulsions, saying I need a break feels like you've broken the rules of ERP when they're different things.
You hit the nail. I was literally going to say that is that it also felt when I made that decision that it felt old history to me,
Yes.
like old Ethan,
Yeah.
pre getting better. I, I make the joke, but it's true. I killed my grandfather like 20 times while he was still alive. Grandpa died. I can't come to the thing. I can't travel. I can't do the thing. I had a fake, this was like early 2000s, but I had a fake obituary that I put into Photoshop. I would just change the date so I could email it to him later and be like, it really happened. And I would do this. And it's like, here was a reason that was 100% valid. Nobody questioned it. It
Yeah.
was not based on OCD. It was a value driven decision. And it felt so icky. I might as well, in my head, my body felt like I might as well have sent a fake obituary to
Yeah.
these people about a fake death with my grandfather. It felt like that. So I wholeheartedly agree with you.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's so important that, that we acknowledge that post recovery or during recovery is that saying acts of compassion sometimes will feel like and sound like they're compulsions when they're actually not. They're
Oh, such a
actually
great
like, I
point.
am
I totally agree
actually
with
at
you.
capacity, or I can't reach that. The expectation was so large, which for you, it sounds like it is for me too. The expectation was so large, I can't meet that either. Right. That sucks. It's not fun.
Yep. No, it's not. It's not. Because, I mean, yeah, there's just these scales that we weigh ourselves on, and what we think we can accomplish. I mean, yeah, the pressure that we put on ourselves, and that's why like the constant constant practice of self-compassion, the constant practice of being mindful and mindfulness,
Yeah.
this constant idea of, I mean, I always forget the exact thing, but you always say like, I strive to be a B minus or C. I can never remember if it's a B minus or C plus,
B
but
minus.
you know,
C
B
plus
minus.
if you
Okay,
really
cool.
need it.
Yeah, C plus. You know, I love, I to this day, and I heard that 10 years ago, and I still struggle with that saying
Yeah.
because, like, you know, like I don't even know that I can verbally say it. Like, I want to be a B. Okay, that's good enough.
A
Because
B,
it sounds terrifying. It's
A,
like,
A.
no, I want to be an A plus at everything I do.
Yeah.
You know, I know we're closing in
Yeah.
on time, and one of the things I just wanted to say is thank you. Not only for being an amazing human being, an amazing advocate, amazing clinician, an okay mom, as we talked about.
Facts. Hashtag facts.
But you know, part of the reason I love advocating and is I really didn't come on here to share a specific point or get something across that I felt was important. I think it's important as an advocate figure, um, for somebody that doesn't like transparency or vulnerability to be as transparent and vulnerable as possible and let people see a window into somebody that they may look at and go, that person doesn't struggle ever. I want to be like that. I see him every week on whatever, and he's got it taken care of. And even when it's hard, it isn't that hard. Like for me, being able to come on and give a window into like Ethan in the last 6 months and
Yeah.
is so crucial and important. So I want to thank you for letting me be here and sort of share a little bit about my own life and where I met the goods and the bads.
Yeah.
And, I wouldn't trade any of it, but I appreciate you.
Yeah. No, thank you. I so appreciate that because it is an up and down journey and we're all figuring it out, myself included. Like you could have interviewed me and I could have done similar things. Like, here are the ways that I suck and really struggle with self-compassion. Here are the times where I've completely forgotten about it as a skill until my therapist is like, you wrote this kind of book about this thing that you might want to practice a little more of. Like, I think that I think that I think it's validating to hear that learning it once is not all you need. It is a constant practice.
Yeah, it definitely is. And self-compassion to me is one of the most important, I mean, skills and tools that we have at our disposal. And it doesn't matter if you have a mental health issue or not. It's just an amazing way of life, and I think I'll always be a student of it. It still feels like Japanese backwards
Yeah.
sometimes, but I'm a lot better at putting my hand. Well, my heart's on that side, but putting my hand in my heart, putting my hand in my heart, and letting myself feel and be there, for myself. And I never mind. I'm a huge staunch advocate of silver linings, and having been on, I've said this a million times, and I'll always say, having been on the sidelines of life and not being able to participate when life gets hard and stressful, deep down, I still have gratitude toward it because that means I'm actually living and participating.
Yeah.
And so even when things feel crappy or whatever, I know there'll be a lesson from it. I know good things will come of it, and it kind of gets me. I try to think of those things as it's happening, and it's meaningful to me because it gives me insight and lets me know that there'll be a lesson down the road. I don't know if it'll pay itself back tomorrow or in 10 years, but someday I'll be able to look at that and be like, well, I got to reintroduce myself to self-compassion. I got to go on Kim Quinlan's podcast, Your Anxiety Toolkit, and be able to talk to folks about my experience, right? So while I didn't quite enjoy it, it was life experience and it was totally worth it for these reasons.
Yeah.
And now I get to turn my pain into my purpose. And I think that's really cool.
I do too. I loved how you said before, moving home felt like it was going backwards, but it was actually going completely forward. And I think that is the reality of life, right? You don't know until later on what it's all about. So I'm so grateful for you being on the show. Thank you so much for coming on again.
Well, thanks for having me, and we'll do one in another 200 episodes.
Yes, let's do it.